I was born to a cinema family. My grandfather and his brothers opened the first talking cinema in the Middle East in 1930, and this has been in the family for many years. And I've watched thousands and thousands of films there, and with my father in the preview room, etc. And so, you know, I always wanted to be a filmmaker. But my father thought it was not a good job. Financially, it was not a good job, and of course he was right. So eventually, I didn't go to become a lawyer or an accountant like my father wanted, but I did not study cinema. I went to university to study philosophy and to art school to study fine art. And later I started working in films, you know, as a production aide, etc. And eventually made my first short film in 1989. And later I stumbled across this amazing story about 5 Arabs that were convicted of killing a Jewish boy. And this became my first documentary, unintendedly, because I thought I would make fiction films. And once I dealt with the reality, once I touched reality from such a close range, I had little inclination to go elsewhere. So this is, I think, how I started. Avenge But One of My Two Eyes started, I think, in somewhere in the beginning of 2002. There was a big wave of suicide bombers inside Israel, Palestinian suicide bombers. And, well, you probably remember there was an international discussion also after following September 11 about death culture of Islam. You know, I don't know too much about Islam, but I do know a little bit about our own culture. And at a certain heated discussion on a day that there was a suicide bomber in Tel Aviv, the subject of death culture of Islam was raised. And I raised the subject of our own death culture, of the Israeli death culture. And the subjects of Masada and Samson were very quickly on the table, because, well, we didn't have to dig them from anywhere because they are very much alive in our culture. So I think that what struck me once thinking about those two myths is that the idea that Samson is actually the first suicide bomber in history, we who consider suicide bombers as, we Israelis, who consider suicide bombers as criminals to humanity, and rightly so. At the same time, we teach our children, we bring up our children on myths, on the heritage of Samson, for instance, who practically is a suicide bomber. When he stands between the pillars in the Gaza temple, his motivation is the exact motivation of the suicide bomber that steps on a bus in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem or anywhere. He decides to kill himself, at the same time kill as many possible of his enemies, which I find horrific. When I realized that, then I think I knew I was going to make a film about that. Well, I never start with a clear plan. I tend to think that I don't know what I'm doing when I'm making the film. But there were a few clear ideas. But I think the basic idea to make like a historical documentary about the stories of the myths of Masada and Samson, to have them narrated by different guides or teachers, whatever, on one hand, and on the other hand, to have them illustrated, unlike historical documentaries where they illustrate the narration by excavations, maps, and sometimes even dramatized scenes with actors and costumes, etc. I thought I would illustrate those two narratives with situations from the occupied territories, documentary situations, which I thought was good enough. If dramatized scenes are good, then this is absolutely good. And so this was the very basic idea. Now, the phone conversations were taped a long time before I was making a film. I didn't know I was making a film at the time. These are spontaneous conversations with friends. Well, during April and May 2002, the Israeli army invaded the Palestinian cities, and there was little information about what's going on, and I started calling people I know to know how they are, what's going on, to express my solidarity. And I started recording those conversations because I had a past experience, a good past experience with taping phone conversations. So I, with an intuition, filmmaker's intuition, I started recording those conversations. And later, when I started to make Avenge But One of My Two Eyes, or when I was in the course of making the film, I realized that there is this one person who was for 2 months in curfew in Bethlehem, and whose emotional graph was like very strong, that he was going to become the backbone of my film. The conversations with him would become the backbone of my film, and this is definitely something that I couldn't anticipate back when I was talking to him on the phone and recording it. Filming in the occupied territories took a long time. I had to go many days to the occupied territories in different setups under different umbrellas, without knowing what a day may bring. Sometimes you don't shoot anything, you don't film anything. Sometimes days can be, you can collect amazing stuff in one day's work. It's all very arbitrary. There are lots of chances working there. So I would go a lot to the occupied territories, days and days, maybe 3 times a week for several months, almost a year, and with different kind of setups, with activists, with journalists, with sometimes stringers that would just lead me from one place to another, sometimes on my own. Usually without a cameraman, because of the arbitrariness of the situation, because you don't know if this is a shooting day or just another pre-production tour. So this is why I shot most of the situations in the occupied territories were filmed by myself. So yes, I tried to film the soldiers when they are not prepared. I mean, if they are doing something that is, if they are violating someone's rights, definitely when they are not prepared. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times they see the camera and they become softer because they don't want to be portrayed as shitty motherfuckers. But sometimes they see the camera and they become harsher, and they would not let anyone cross a checkpoint or something like that until you remove the camera, and you become the holder of the key to the checkpoint, which is not a very comfortable position to be in. considering that you are interested in the well-being of those citizens, and you do not support what the soldiers are doing. I don't think that I don't think that when you go to the occupied territories that you can really, well, not if you have, not for me, I didn't feel that at any moment any kind of sympathy to the soldiers. Because, well, not because they're not human, I mean, not because they do not deserve any sympathy, but the problem is that their role is the role of the occupier, always. It's, even if they are nice, if they are the nicest, they have nothing to do there. It's not enough that they want to be nice and they don't look into humiliating anyone. The fact that they are there is a problem in itself. So it's very hard to sympathize with what they're doing or with them. I would sympathize with any of those soldiers when they desert their post and go to jail. This is the point where I really sympathize with them. Well, the film came out, was released in one cinema in Tel Aviv. No professional distributors didn't want to take it, so I had to distribute it myself. One cinema in Tel Aviv, 3 weeks, 3 times a day. Very, very few people came to see it, although the press was very good, the critics were really good, but apparently people didn't want to see it. It's very obvious. I don't think I was surprised, but I was disappointed. I hoped that the film would create more interest, more curiosity in the Israeli public. Outside Israel, well, the film is extremely well received. It started with the film being selected for the official selection of the Cannes Film Festival, which for me was this was a big surprise for me. When Serge, my producer, was told many months before the festival that we are in, it was very hard for me to accept it, and every 2 or 3 weeks he had to call Thierry Fremont, the artistic director of Cannes, to get a confirmation for Avi. But apparently the film was in Cannes, and since then it's doing very, very well in festivals and winning quite a few prizes, and being released in cinemas in Europe and in Canada. So it's I'm very happy with the international reaction. I certainly hope that the film would provoke thoughts, and would be very disappointed if people would just say, "Oh yeah, right, okay, why not? Yes, maybe." I am more happy when people are sometimes angry or not very happy with the way I show things or the way I see things. But yes, I hope that you can draw from our experience or from our situation to maybe understand bigger issues or more universal issues. I try not to see myself as a big world corrector. I try to address my society, our situation, the Middle East, maybe the problems and the possible solutions of the Middle East. And if people find it also compatible to other situations, I would be happy. I mean, but I do not think in a universal. I'm not a big universal thinker.